Hi, I'm Stefan, the BMW DIY guy, and I am super excited to show you how you can easily install the front sway bar from the BMW M2 CSR. Yeah, that is the official racing division of BMW, the front sway bar into your M2 Competition. All right, so a couple of things before we jump into the work itself. So first of all, you will have your car in the air. So a jack and two jack stands, or use something like quick jacks like I do, and I've got a video for that. I highly recommend them. It's a tool that has just paid for itself dozens of times over for me. So I think it's worth it. Now, I'm always gonna stress anytime you get your car in the air, anytime you're underneath it, please be safe. Do not bet your life on a 50-cent part, a little hydraulic arm or something similar in your jack, okay? Please make sure to use jack stands. Make sure your car is on a stable, secure surface and you do it properly. I have seen floor jacks fail. They fail suddenly out of the blue and then bang, your car is on the ground. If you're underneath it, that can be a very, very terrible mistake. So please be careful. Make sure to use all the proper tools or use something like quick jacks and use them properly, okay? Now with the part itself, I am really excited to get the sway bar in. This is the official M2 CSR sway bar. It is actually about twice as heavy. It is solid, and it is going to make a big difference in this car. Now, BMW started advertising that you could get the CSR parts, but if you're here in the States, in the US like I am, as it turns out, they're almost impossible, if not impossible, to get. So they're advertised, but then you can't buy them. But I was determined to work it out. So if you do click on the link below, and I'll have all the tools and all the parts and everything you need in the video description as normal. So if you do click on that and you have the click on the link for the bushings and for the sway bar itself, don't be surprised when you go to the link from Schmiedmann's, which is where I bought mine. So prices were great, shipping was no big deal, and it worked out perfectly. So I think they're a great resource for finding these parts. So this is actually not all that hard. You're going to be able to do this relatively simply. It's much easier than, for example, in my video in the F32, because where the front sway bar goes over the top of the subframe. And so you have to lower the whole subframe and deal with all of that extra disconnect of parts and components and all that hassle in your steering column. Much, much harder. Really, when it comes down to it, once you got your wheels off, this is basically done in 6 bolts, really. I mean, that's really all it takes to get the OEM off. So I've got the sway bar and the bushings. This should be relatively straightforward. So the first thing we're gonna do is I'm gonna loosen all the bolts on my wheels while it's still on the ground, so it's a lot easier to take them off. We're gonna get the car up in the air, take the wheels off, and then we're gonna work on it from there. I'll walk you through every single step. It's not hard, and let's get started. All right, so both front wheels are off. This car's safely in the air, and you can easily see your sway bar. So it is right here. This is the end of your sway bar as it curls underneath the subframe, curls up, and hits your end link right here. So you're going to be taking the nut off the end of your end link right here, and then where the bushings are up underneath. But in the interim, what you're going to need to do is slide underneath and pull your stiffening plate off. So let's go ahead and get that off. It's going to be a whole bunch of 16mm bolts. I'll slide underneath and show you, but then strip them all off and drop your stiffening plate. Keep in mind it's big and heavy, so I usually save the middle ones for last, and then I could just drop it down carefully and controlled and set it aside. Okay, so here we are looking underneath the nose of the car. Now, if you have the plastic front cover over your oil cooler, obviously I've got the Turner aluminum one, which is much, much better. Make sure to check out my video on that. I highly recommend it. But your removal process is going to be essentially the same. You have a whole series of 8mm that go across this front edge all along there. You've got 8mm around the outside of your stiffening plate, which is this big metal piece right here. So take all the 8mm out all the way around the perimeter. And then you'll have, as you can see, the big 16mm bolts. Go ahead and just take those off. Like I said, I usually save the middle ones for last, so that way I can drop it down all nice and controlled. But really, that's all you need to do to take it off, because here's the end of your sway bar again, where I pointed it out a second ago. It curls up, and there's a couple of brackets that hold the bushings on and hold it in place. We just need to be able to get to those brackets. So take all the 8mm out around the perimeter, and then take the 16s off and drop off your stiffening plate. Okay, so the stiffening plate is off. As you can see, there's a couple of additional little pieces of plastic we're going to take off just to make it slightly easier. You could even maybe leave them on. It's just only a couple of 8 millimeters more, so I'm going to go ahead and take them off. But here we are underneath the car. You can see the stiffening plate is off. We can see the front sway bar as it goes across, and it has those two brackets on each side. And there are 13 millimeter nuts that hold that into place. But the first thing we want to do is we need to take the end link off. Now, I've got my 16 millimeter ratcheting socket on here just to show you what's going on. You'll need a socket or you'll need a ratcheting wrench or an open socket where you can put a pass through the top of the socket, because you can't just take this 16 millimeter bolt off. You actually have to hold the pin it's on as well, because it'll just free spin in the end link. So I've got my Torx bit here. This is a T30 that goes into the post on the end of the end link right here, which is going to be hard to do from this angle, I bet, right at the moment. But no, got it in. There we go. So I'll get a wrench up here and I'll hold the center post of this while I back this nut off. Okay. Now, you can also take this little bit of extra plastic trim off. It's like 1, 2, 3. I think it's like 3 more 8 millimeter bolts. I'm going to take that off, so that'll be out of the way as well, just to kind of reduce my interference. So take the 16 millimeter nuts off and hold them with the center post with like I mentioned, a T30. So go ahead and do that at either end. And then you can take these brackets off with 13 millimeter nuts that sit on each side, and then this will come out very, very easily. Okay, so I have the driver's side almost done, but I just want to show you so you get a good picture of what I mean about stacking your wrench in there. So as you can see, I've got my T30 bit here into the end of the post. I've got my 16 millimeter ratcheting socket on the nut, and it comes right out. Now, the other thing you'll notice is I've got one more piece of plastic missing. Now, due to the length of my T30 bit, I couldn't get the wrench to fit in there because this bit of shielding plastic was in the way. So I just took 2 additional 8 millimeter bolts out here and then just fit that molded plastic out. And then I've got plenty of room to work on both sides. So the nut itself is loose. I just wanted to show you what it looks like when you do it. And as you can see, the end link has already backed its way almost entirely out. So I'm going to go do the driver's side, and then I'm going to take the 2 brackets off the sway bar, and then we can just fit it out. All right, y'all. It really is that simple. It comes out that easily. And I think I mentioned earlier, if you watch my F32 video on how to replace your front sway bar. Oh man, this is so much easier. Talk about just cake. So you can see the original there up top. It's even got a narrow section right in the middle, which is interesting, where they cut the diameter a little bit, and then you can see the new one, which is so much bigger. So the new one is twice as heavy. The old one, if I remember correctly, is like 9 pounds. The new one is 18. It's much thicker. It's much more solid. It is a solid bar. I'm really impressed in the differences. Now the other thing is, if you'll notice, it also has 2 holes in the end for the end links rather than just 1. So you have the ability to adjust it by a little bit. I'm going to go in the farthest out end link, which is the most conservative of the 2, as a start. If I feel like it needs adjustment anymore, I will bring both end links in 1. But for now, I will start there. But really, what a substantial difference. So the only thing we really need to do now is, as you can see in the bag right there, I've got the new bushings, because you can't reuse the existing ones because this is bigger diameter. So I've got new bushings, and we said the part numbers will be there in the description of the video. So now what you have to do is back these brackets off. Now, when I thought about just buying new brackets, but you can reuse these, and even if you look at some of the official information, it's got no problem reusing them. So what you're going to do, they have these little knobs on them. You're going to use a tool, and these split in half, but you have to press these brackets off. Now, the bushings you don't care about anymore. That doesn't really matter. So even if you tear them up in the process, that's okay because you've got the new ones. But you have to reuse these. Now, the other thing I want to point out is I want you to notice is that the bushing is right up against this fitting here. So when you put it back on, you can see the new fitting right there. So they'll be on this side, so on the wheel side, right up against that ridge right there. So go ahead and press these brackets off, and so because we're going to reuse them, then we'll put the new bushings in place on each side and put those brackets on them, and then just bolt this right back into place. Okay, so easy transfers. So the bushings on the originals are 2-parters. So when they're in this down position and you start to press on them, this lower section will start to push up, and then you can very easily get a screwdriver or a tool in there and pop it free, and then the bracket will pop free. Easy. The new ones, as you can see, I have one done and the other not done because I wanted to show you what that looks like. Now, make sure, absolutely triple make sure they're in the same orientation. So you can see the flanges that we've got curved to the inside, which is what it looked like on the old bar. So just make sure that you're putting the back in the same orientation. That would be a huge drag to put them on backwards, right? So here's the new one. So now these bushings actually split. So what you do is you just fit it over the bar, and then here it is in place. Here's the bracket in the correct orientation, right? So what I want to do is get it pressed into place. Now what I found is the easiest way, it's going to be in this orientation when it's actually installed, right? Like this. But what I found is easiest to actually press it in from above like this. Okay, and then just rotate it back over. Wasn't all that hard. There are these little rubber tabs that you need to fit into these little locking windows on each side. There's a little center post right on the top that goes right on the top. But all in all, it just presses into place very, very easily. So just get that pressed on, and then we will be back underneath the car to hang it back off these brackets, and then we connect the end links and you're done. It really is that simple. All right, so the bushings are pressed into place. The little tabs are through the little cutout windows in the brackets. All nice and easy, as you can see, so just ready to reposition and get underneath the car. So what you're going to want to do is slide underneath and hold the bar up and then attach those brackets. Now, you could always attach them loosely for now to give you a little bit of room to maneuver and work around. When you're finally done, you're looking at 28 Newton meters of torque on the brackets themselves and 56 on the end link nuts. So go ahead and rehang your sway bar. Go ahead and just put it up into place. Get those nuts back on, and then if it's good and simple and easy, just get it rehung and then get everything torqued down. I'll show you what that looks like, but all in all, this is really simple, as you can tell. Okay, all right, so reinstalled, super easy. You can see here, reattached here to the end link. And like I said, that's 56 Newton meters here on that nut. Now, some of the information says you should renew these nuts, also the ones for the brackets as well. I didn't. I reused them. In retrospect, I might have. Sometimes when BMW says reuse them, I do. Sometimes when they say renew them, I do. But if you want to be really strict, then yes, you will replace these nuts. They're supposed to be single use. So I reused them in this case. It's in the outermost hole for the end link. As you can see, it comes across. You can see the brackets installed. It's torqued down to 28 Newton meters, 56 on the end, 28 in the middle. All installed. Looks great all the way across and reattached on the driver's side, or excuse me, passenger side. So super simple. This is, as far as suspension upgrades, this is about the easiest that you could possibly do. The rear one, which a lot of the recommendations, so to maybe head off some of the questions, because the next automatic question is going to be am I going to change the rear? So in this case, I'm not, for at least for a little bit, and I may not ever. I've seen some advice and I've seen some really good analysis that the rear really doesn't make that much difference. And if you're upgrading the front, I've seen some track results and some really specific scientific testing of replacing this front one and not changing the rear, and it being a net positive. It being a positive change that you don't need to change the rear. And to top it off, the rear goes over the top of the subframe, much like the F3X, earlier models, where this goes under in the front, it goes over in the rear, which I did on my F30, and I've got a video for it. I could certainly do it again if I have to, but at this point, I'm not going to. As far as the front is concerned, this is about as easy as possibly ever going to get to change your sway bar, so super simple. So the next thing you'd want to do is replace any of the plastics. I pulled my plastics, these upper plastics here, to make it easier just because of the length of my T30 bit. So I'm going to replace my plastics. I'm going to replace that cross plastic that went right here on both sides. Once that's all done, you put your stiffening plate back on with the 16 millimeter bolts all the way around, surrounded by the 8s all the way around the outside. So just the reverse order that you took it off. So super simple. Let me get all the plastics back on and the plate back on, and we're about done. All right, guys, quick check here from the outside. The stiffening plate is on. All the 8mm are in. It is 56 Newton meters of torque on all those 16mm bolts on the stiffening plate underneath. Now, one thing to keep in mind, those bolts are stretch bolts. So they're 56 plus 90, and you're supposed to renew them. So I've had those bolts off a dozen times now, and I've not replaced them once. If I ever get to the point where I think I'm probably not going to take that plate off anytime soon, then yeah, I'm going to replace those bolts, because I've done them so many times, right? But just keep that in mind. If you take them on and off a lot, you're going to be spending a lot of money on bolts very frequently. So now the other thing, and the reason why we're staring at the wheel, is because obviously the next thing to do is to put your wheels back on. And this being an M2C, I'm going to give you advice that my initial reaction was, wait, what? So for a long time, BMW lug nuts are 101 foot-pounds, and whatever that translates to in Newton meters. Now, this is an M2C, so this is the work I'm doing this on. If you read the manual, it is 140 Newton meters. You didn't mishear me. Not 110, not 120, 140. Now, before you freak out and say, wow, that cannot be right, it is directly out of the manual for the M2C. So when I put my wheels back on, I'm going to be putting them back on at 140, because that's what it says we should do. So don't bother getting a big argument of what maybe it should be more, should be less. And I can't imagine more. Probably could be less, would be fine, but I'm just going to go exactly off what the manual says to do, and I'm going to tell you exactly what the manual says to do. You can choose to do otherwise if you wish. So, all the plastics are on. The lug nuts for the bolts for the tension plate underneath, or that locking stiffening plate underneath, is good to go. I'm going to put my wheels back on, put it on the ground, and we're done. All right, y'all, so all done. Everything's torqued to spec and tools put away. I'm just going to take the car for a quick test drive. And I'm really excited to have this in my car. So now the rumor is that this sway bar from BMW from the CSR, the M2 CSR, is exactly the H&R sway bar that you can get from almost, from many different places. The crazy thing though that no one can seem to explain is you find it for the actual retail list price from BMW, it's a lot less expensive than the H&R. Makes no sense to me, but it made this a must-do for me. I will freely admit I'm gonna have that grin on my face that I've got a piece of the M2 CSR race car in my M2C, and then I found it for a little bit cheaper, which was cool. So make sure to check out the links below. If you're unable to get that through those links, you can get the H&R bar. The install is gonna be exactly the same. You can get it from someplace cool like Keys Motorsports. Highly suggested if you can't track down the CSR bar yourself. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Please make sure to click subscribe and the little alarm bell. It makes a huge difference to my channel, and I have a ton of content always coming, and I've got some really cool stuff coming on the radar, so make sure to check it out. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on my next project.